November 15th, 1942, the waters around Guadalcanal lay black and silent under a moonless sky. No wind stirred the tropical air, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves against steel hulls and the distant rumble of engines echoing across the dark Pacific. Two massive warships moved through these waters like steel phantoms, their crews straining to peer through the impenetrable darkness that had become both weapon and shield in the brutal campaign for control of this strategic island. The night belonged to no one yet, but that was about to change forever. The USS Washington cut through the black waters with the confidence of American industrial might. Her sleek hull, stretching over 700 feet from bow to stern, displaced nearly 45,000 tons of perfectly engineered steel. 9 massive 16-inch guns, each barrel longer than a city bus, dominated her forward and aft superstructure. These weapons could hurl armor-piercing shells, weighing over a ton across distances exceeding 20 miles. But tonight, her most deadly weapon was invisible. A revolutionary radar system that could see through darkness itself, painting targets on glowing screens, while enemy lookouts strained helplessly against the night. Her 2,500-man crew moved with practiced efficiency through passages lit only by red battle lights, each sailor knowing that American technology was about to be tested against the most dangerous night fighters in the world. 15 miles away, the Kirishima prowled the same waters with the deadly grace that had made the Imperial Japanese Navy masters of nocturnal warfare. This veteran battleship, converted from a battlecruiser design, carried the pride and tradition of samurai naval warfare into the modern age. Her 4 twin 14-inch gun turrets, though smaller than the American weapons, were served by crews who had perfected the art of night gunnery through years of relentless training. Japanese sailors, their eyes adapted to darkness through careful preparation, scanned the horizon with binoculars and practiced instincts that had won them victory after victory in night battles across the Pacific. The Kirishima's mission was simple: silence the American airfield on Guadalcanal and destroy any enemy forces foolish enough to challenge Japanese control of these waters. The two steel giants approached each other through the darkness, neither crew fully aware that they were about to participate in a duel that would demonstrate the future of naval warfare. Traditional Japanese night-fighting doctrine, honed through decades of training and proven in battle, was about to collide with American radar technology so advanced that it seemed like science fiction. But in the black waters of Guadalcanal, who would see first and who would burn, the Guadalcanal campaign had transformed from a limited operation into a grinding, attritional battle that would determine the fate of the Pacific War. Since August 1942, American Marines had clung desperately to Henderson Field, the airstrip that represented the only significant Allied foothold in the Solomon Islands chain. This single runway, carved from jungle and coral, had become the focal point of a campaign that consumed ships, aircraft, and men at an unprecedented rate. Control of Henderson Field meant control of the air approaches to Australia, making Guadalcanal the strategic hinge upon which the entire Pacific theatre would turn. Both sides poured resources into this remote island with an intensity that transformed every battle into a struggle for national survival. Japanese naval strategy had evolved around their absolute dominance of night warfare, a capability that had proven devastatingly effective in the early months of the Pacific conflict. The Imperial Navy's superiority in night combat stemmed from years of intensive training, superior optical equipment, and tactical doctrines that maximized the advantages of darkness while minimizing Japanese weaknesses in industrial production and radar technology. Japanese crews spent countless hours practicing night gunnery, learning to fire accurately using star shells, searchlights, and the brief illumination of enemy muzzle flashes. This expertise had allowed relatively small Japanese task forces to inflict disproportionate casualties on Allied forces, turning the waters around Guadalcanal into what American sailors grimly nicknamed Iron Bottom Sound for the dozens of ships that had been sunk in its depths. The strategic situation around Guadalcanal had reached a critical juncture by November 1942, with both sides recognizing that the upcoming battles would likely determine the campaign's outcome. Japanese forces were preparing a massive offensive designed to recapture Henderson Field and eliminate the American presence once and for all. The plan required careful coordination between ground assaults, naval bombardment, and air attacks, with the Imperial Navy playing a crucial role in neutralizing American air power before the final ground offensive began. Japanese commanders believed that their superior night-fighting capabilities would allow them to bombard Henderson Field with impunity, destroying American aircraft and installations, while avoiding daylight encounters with superior American industrial resources. The USS Washington represented a new generation of American battleship design that incorporated lessons learned from both World War I and the early phases of the Pacific War. Her North Carolina-class design emphasized speed, protection, and firepower in equal measure, creating a warship capable of engaging any opponent while maintaining the mobility necessary for Pacific operations. More importantly, the Washington carried the most advanced radar systems available to any Navy in 1942, including the revolutionary SG surface search radar that could detect enemy vessels at ranges exceeding 20 miles. This technological advantage transformed night combat from a contest of human skill and training into a battle where American industrial supremacy could be brought to bear, even in complete darkness. American radar technology in late 1942 represented a quantum leap in naval warfare capabilities that few outside the most classified circles fully understood. The Washington's radar systems could not only detect enemy ships through darkness and weather, but could also provide accurate range and bearing information for gunnery solutions. This capability meant that American gunners could engage targets they could not see, firing accurately at ranges and in conditions where traditional optical sighting was impossible. The psychological impact of this advantage was as significant as its tactical implications. American crews could fight with confidence in any conditions, while their enemies faced the terrifying prospect of being destroyed by an invisible opponent who could strike without warning. Japanese intelligence services had detected hints of American radar development, but significantly underestimated both its capabilities and deployment. Pre-war Japanese naval doctrine had dismissed radar as an unreliable technology unsuitable for precision gunnery, preferring to rely on proven methods of optical sighting and human expertise. This assessment proved catastrophically wrong, as American radar technology matured far more rapidly than Japanese analysts had predicted. The Imperial Navy's emphasis on night warfare, once a decisive advantage, was becoming a liability, as American ships equipped with radar could operate effectively in any lighting conditions, while Japanese vessels remained dependent on human visual capabilities. The tactical situation on November 14-15, 1942, brought these competing philosophies into direct collision as both sides maneuvered for decisive advantage around Guadalcanal. Japanese Admiral Hiroaki Abe commanded a powerful task force built around the battleships Hiei and Kirishima, supported by cruisers and destroyers optimized for night combat. His mission was straightforward: approach Henderson Field under cover of darkness, bombard the airstrip with battleship guns, and withdraw before American daylight air attacks could inflict significant damage. This plan had worked successfully in previous operations, and Japanese commanders had every reason to expect similar results against what they perceived as inferior American night-fighting capabilities. American Admiral Willis Lee commanded a much smaller force centered on the USS Washington and South Dakota, supported by only 4 destroyers. His orders were equally clear: intercept Japanese bombardment forces and prevent them from reaching Henderson Field, regardless of the odds or tactical disadvantage. Lee's confidence rested not on superior numbers or firepower, but on the revolutionary radar systems that gave his ships capabilities no Japanese commander could fully comprehend. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only the courage and skill of both navies, but also the relative merits of traditional naval warfare versus emerging technological solutions. The broader strategic implications of the approaching battle extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation around Guadalcanal. American industrial production was reaching peak efficiency, producing warships, aircraft, and equipment at rates that Japanese planners had deemed impossible. However, this industrial advantage was meaningless if American forces could not effectively engage Japanese naval units that continued to demonstrate superior tactical capabilities in night combat. A decisive American victory using radar-directed gunnery would validate the technological approach to naval warfare, while a Japanese success would prolong the war and potentially force American strategists to reconsider their reliance on industrial production over traditional naval skills. The human element remained crucial despite the growing importance of technology and industrial capacity. Both American and Japanese crews were veterans of months of brutal combat around Guadalcanal, their skills honed by constant action and their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that defeat meant not only personal death but potential strategic disaster for their nations. The Washington's crew had trained extensively with their radar systems, learning to trust instruments over instincts and to fight effectively in conditions where traditional seamanship provided no advantage. Japanese sailors aboard the Kirishima brought decades of night fighting experience and an unshakable belief in their tactical superiority. Confident that American technology could not overcome Japanese skill and determination in the darkness that had become their natural element. At 23:11 hours, the USS Washington's SG radar operators detected multiple contacts bearing northwest at a range of 18,000 yards. The green glow of the radar screen painted an unmistakable picture, a large formation of Japanese warships approaching Henderson Field with deadly intent. Lieutenant Commander Harvey Walsh, the ship's radar officer, called out ranges and bearings in a calm, professional voice that belied the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Multiple contacts, bearing 320, range 18,000 and closing. Large ships, probably battleships with escorts. The words echoed through the Washington's Combat Information Center, where dozens of sailors bent over plotting tables and radar repeaters, transforming electronic blips into tactical intelligence that would guide American guns with unprecedented precision. Admiral Willis Lee absorbed this information with the cool professionalism that had earned him command of the most powerful American battleship in the Pacific. Standing in the Washington's flag plot, surrounded by communications equipment and tactical displays, Lee understood that he was witnessing a revolution in naval warfare. His ships could see the enemy formation with crystal clarity while remaining invisible to Japanese lookouts straining against the impenetrable darkness. The tactical advantage was enormous, but Lee also knew that radar was only as effective as the men who interpreted its signals and the guns that acted on its information. He gave the order that would change naval history. All ships, this is Washington. We have multiple enemy contacts approaching from the northwest. Prepare for surface action. The Japanese formation, led by Admiral Hiroaki Abe in the battleship Hawaii, approached with the confidence born of years of successful night operations. Aboard the Kirishima, Captain Sanji Iwabuchi maintained his ship at battle stations, her crew prepared for the type of close-range night action that had made the Imperial Navy feared throughout the Pacific. Japanese lookouts, their eyes carefully adapted to darkness, swept the horizon with powerful binoculars, searching for the telltale signs of enemy presence. Muzzle flashes, searchlight beams, or the distinctive silhouettes of American warships. They saw nothing but empty ocean, stretching endlessly under the starless sky, giving no indication that death was already locked onto their position by electronic systems they could neither see nor comprehend. At 23:16 hours, the range had closed to 12,000 yards when the Washington's main battery director locked onto the largest radar contact, the Kirishima. Fire-controlled computers, mechanical marvels of American engineering, calculated firing solutions with machine precision. Wind speed, target bearing, range rate, and the ballistic characteristics of 16-inch armor-piercing shells were processed automatically, producing firing data accurate enough to hit targets beyond visual range. Gunner's mate, First Class Mike Rodriguez, manning the main battery plot, watched as mechanical dials and indicators aligned with mathematical perfection. "Main battery has a solution," he reported. "Target bearing 328, range 12,000, speed 18 knots. The order to commence firing came at 23:17 hours, delivered in Admiral Lee's calm Virginia drawl. "Washington, you may fire when ready." The words had barely finished echoing through the ship's communication system when the forward turrets began their deadly work. Each 16-inch gun barrel, weighing over 100 tons and capable of hurling a 2,700-pound projectile at velocities exceeding 2,500 feet per second, elevated to the precise angle calculated by the fire-controlled computers. The first salvo erupted with a thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ocean itself. 9 massive guns, firing in perfect synchronization, their muzzle flashes illuminating the Washington's superstructure like brief glimpses of hell unleashed upon the darkness. The armor-piercing shells, each one a precision-engineered instrument of destruction, traced ballistic arcs through the night air at speeds that compressed their 23-second flight time into an eternity of anticipated devastation. Japanese lookouts aboard the Kirishima finally detected the American presence, not through visual sighting or electronic warning, but through the supersonic crack of incoming projectiles that announced their doom with mathematical precision. The first salvo straddled the Japanese battleship, geysers of water erupting around her hull as 16-inch shells struck the ocean with impacts that sent shockwaves through every steel plate and rivet. Captain Iwabuchi, realizing his ship was under fire from an invisible enemy, ordered emergency turns and speed increases, but radar-directed gunnery made evasive maneuvers futile against an opponent who could track every movement with electronic precision. The second salvo found its mark with devastating effect, 3 shells striking the Kirishima's superstructure and forward turrets simultaneously. The first shell penetrated the battleship's bridge structure, detonating inside the command spaces and killing most of the senior officers instantly. The explosion turned the bridge into a furnace of twisted steel and shattered equipment, eliminating the ship's ability to coordinate defensive actions or call for support. The second shell struck the forward 14-inch turret, its armor-piercing tip punching through the turret face before exploding inside the gunhouse. The blast killed the entire turret crew and ignited propellant charges, creating a secondary explosion that sent flames shooting skyward like a torch visible for miles across the dark Pacific. The third shell, perhaps the most devastating of all, penetrated the Kirishima's armored deck near the forward magazine spaces. The delay fuse functioned perfectly, allowing the projectile to burrow deep into the ship's vitals before detonating with enough force to crack the battleship's keel. The explosion ruptured fuel lines, collapsed bulkheads, and started fires that spread rapidly through the ship's internal compartments, Japanese damage control parties, trained to respond to battle damage with samurai-like dedication, found themselves fighting blazes that defied every technique in their repertoire. The ship's electrical systems failed, plunging interior spaces into darkness, relieved only by the hellish glow of spreading fires. Japanese sailors throughout the Kirishima felt their world transforming into a nightmare of flame and smoke as American shells continued to rain down with metronomic precision. Every 25 seconds, another salvo arrived from the invisible American battle wagon, each group of shells guided by radar systems that tracked the burning Japanese vessel with remorseless accuracy. The ship's anti-aircraft guns, designed to engage aircraft, proved useless against shells arriving from beyond visual range. Secondary armament intended for use against smaller vessels could not return fire against an enemy they could not locate. The Kirishima's main battery, her pride and primary armament, remained largely intact but utterly ineffective against an opponent who fought from beyond the reach of optical sighting systems. Captain Iwabuchi, wounded but still conscious in the wreckage of his bridge, attempted to coordinate his ship's defense from an auxiliary command position deep within the superstructure. Radio communications with other Japanese vessels revealed the shocking scope of the disaster. The entire formation was under attack by radar-equipped American ships that could engage with impunity while remaining invisible to Japanese lookouts. The tactical situation had become hopeless within minutes, as traditional Japanese night-fighting advantages proved worthless against opponents who possessed electronic eyes capable of seeing through any darkness. The captain's final radio transmission was brief and filled with the horror of recognition. "They can see us, but we cannot see them. The ship is doomed." By 23:25 hours, less than 8 minutes after the first American salvo, the Kirishima was a burning wreck drifting helplessly through waters, illuminated by her own funeral pyre. The battleship's forward half was completely engulfed in flames that reached hundreds of feet into the night sky, creating an inferno visible to observers on Guadalcanal 30 miles away. American shells had struck her hull, superstructure, and turrets with surgical precision, each hit guided by radar systems that made darkness irrelevant and evasive maneuvers futile. The proud warship that had carried Japanese naval tradition into the modern age was dying in a manner that her designers and crew had never imagined possible, destroyed by an enemy she could not fight because she could not see. The Washington continued her methodical destruction of the Japanese formation, her radar operators tracking multiple targets, while her gun crews serviced their weapons with mechanical precision. Shells continued to rain down on the burning Kirishima, not from malice, but from tactical necessity. Until the enemy vessel was completely neutralized, she remained a potential threat to American operations around Guadalcanal. Each successive salvo added to the devastation, penetrating armor that had been designed to withstand the heaviest guns afloat, starting fires that consumed everything combustible, and killing sailors who had trained their entire careers for a type of warfare that was already obsolete. Japanese survivors, those lucky enough to reach the Kirishima's upper decks before smoke and flame consumed the interior passages, witnessed a transformation of naval combat that rendered their years of training and experience meaningless. The night, once their domain and their weapon, had become their enemy's advantage through technology they could neither see nor understand. American shells arrived with the precision of clockwork, guided by systems that made human skill and courage irrelevant in the face of electronic superiority. As they abandoned their dying ship, Japanese sailors carried with them the knowledge that their Navy's greatest advantage had been neutralized by American ingenuity and industrial might. The end came at 03:20 hours on November 15th, when the Kirishima's magazine spaces finally succumbed to the fires that had been consuming her for hours. The explosion, when it came, was visible from Henderson Field and lit up the entire formation of ships scattered across Iron Bottom Sound. The blast lifted the battleship's forward turrets completely off their mountings and broke her back so thoroughly that she began settling by the bow almost immediately. Within minutes, the Kirishima rolled to port and disappeared beneath the waves, carrying with her over 500 officers and men who had learned too late that the age of radar had made traditional naval warfare obsolete. The waters that closed over Japan's newest battleship loss also buried the myth of Japanese invincibility in night combat. The USS Washington, her mission accomplished and her ammunition expended, turned away from the scene of destruction with her crew stunned by the completeness of their victory. In less than 4 hours, they had engaged and destroyed a Japanese battleship using weapons and tactics that represented a revolution in naval warfare. The radar systems that had guided their guns with such devastating precision were no longer experimental technology, but proven combat systems that would reshape naval doctrine for generations to come. As the American battleship steamed towards safer waters, her crew began to comprehend that they had not simply won a battle. They had participated in the birth of modern naval warfare, where electronics would prove more decisive than courage and industrial capacity more important than traditional seamanship. The sinking of the Kirishima sent shockwaves through the Imperial Japanese Navy that extended far beyond the immediate tactical disaster at Guadalcanal. Senior officers who had built their careers around the doctrine of night surface combat found themselves confronting the reality that American radar technology had neutralized Japan's most significant naval advantage overnight. Admiral Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack and supreme commander of the combined fleet, received battle reports that seemed to describe science fiction rather than conventional naval warfare. American ships were engaging Japanese vessels at ranges and in conditions where return fire was impossible, transforming naval combat from a contest of skill and courage into a technological massacre where Japanese training and experience counted for nothing. Japanese naval intelligence services launched desperate efforts to understand the full implications of American radar capabilities, but their investigations revealed the terrifying scope of Japan's technological disadvantage. Captured documents and interrogated prisoners painted a picture of American radar development that was years ahead of Japanese estimates. The Washington's ability to track and engage multiple targets simultaneously while remaining invisible to Japanese observers represented a quantum leap in naval warfare that Japan's scientists and engineers were unprepared to match. More ominously, intelligence reports suggested that radar-equipped ships were entering American service at a rate that would soon give the United States overwhelming advantages in every type of naval engagement. The psychological impact on Japanese naval personnel was even more devastating than the immediate material losses around Guadalcanal. Sailors and officers who had demonstrated incredible courage in countless night battles, now faced the prospect of fighting an enemy they could not see or effectively engage. The samurai tradition of honorable combat seemed meaningless against opponents who could kill from beyond the horizon without warning or opportunity for retaliation. Morale reports from the combined fleet revealed growing reluctance among junior officers to volunteer for night surface actions, while senior commanders began questioning tactical doctrines that had formed the foundation of Japanese naval strategy since the Russo-Japanese War. American forces, conversely, experienced a surge in confidence that transformed their approach to Pacific naval operations. The Washington's crew returned to base as heroes, who had proven that American technology could overcome any enemy advantages through superior engineering and industrial capacity. News of the radar-guided victory spread rapidly through the Pacific Fleet, inspiring sailors and officers who had endured months of tactical defeats and strategic uncertainty. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American naval personnel felt they possessed weapons and systems that gave them decisive advantages over their Japanese opponents in any type of engagement. The strategic implications of the Kirishima's destruction extended far beyond single ship-to-ship combat, fundamentally altering the balance of power in the Solomon Islands campaign. Japanese plans for the recapture of Henderson Field had depended on the Imperial Navy's ability to bombard American positions with impunity under cover of darkness. The loss of this capability meant that Japanese ground forces would have to assault well-defended positions without the naval fire support that had been central to their operational planning. American commanders, meanwhile, could now commit their surface forces to night operations, with confidence that radar would provide decisive tactical advantages in any engagement. Industrial and technological developments accelerated as both sides attempted to adapt to the new realities of radar-dominated warfare. American shipyards received priority orders for radar-equipped vessels, with production schedules modified to ensure that every new warship carried the most advanced fire control systems available. Research and development programs focused on improving radar accuracy, range, and reliability, while training programs were expanded to ensure that American crews could maximize the potential of their electronic advantages. The United States was not simply building more ships, it was creating a new type of navy optimized for technological warfare rather than traditional seamanship. Japanese responses to the radar revolution revealed both the strengths and limitations of their wartime industrial capacity. Crash programs were initiated to develop indigenous radar systems, but Japanese electronics technology lagged far behind American capabilities and could not be rapidly improved without fundamental changes in research priorities and manufacturing techniques. More immediately practical were efforts to modify existing ships with better optical equipment, improved communication systems, and tactics designed to minimize exposure to radar-guided gunfire. However, these modifications were expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately insufficient to overcome the fundamental advantages that radar provided to American forces. The human cost of the technological transition was enormous on both sides, though for very different reasons. Japanese naval casualties mounted rapidly as radar-equipped American ships engaged Japanese forces with devastating effectiveness in conditions where return fire was impossible or ineffective. Traditional Japanese naval tactics that had proven successful for decades became death traps when employed against enemies who possessed electronic advantages. American casualties, meanwhile, reflected the psychological strain of operating revolutionary weapons systems under combat conditions, as radar operators and fire control technicians worked under enormous pressure to maximize their technological advantages, while traditional sailors adapted to new forms of warfare they barely understood. Communication intercepts revealed the growing desperation in Japanese naval operations as commanders struggled to develop effective countermeasures against American radar capabilities. Radio traffic analysis showed increasing references to invisible enemies and phantom ships that could attack without warning from beyond visual range. Japanese tactical doctrine underwent emergency revisions, with new emphasis on electronic warfare, night reconnaissance, and evasive maneuvering designed to complicate American radar tracking. However, these adaptive measures required training time and resources that the Imperial Navy could ill afford during the desperate battles of late 1942. The propaganda war intensified as both sides attempted to control the narrative surrounding the Kirishima's loss and its implications for Pacific naval operations. Japanese media emphasized the heroic sacrifice of the battleship's crew while downplaying the technological aspects of their defeat, maintaining that Japanese spiritual superiority would ultimately overcome American material advantages. American propaganda, meanwhile, celebrated the victory as proof that democratic industrial capacity and scientific innovation could defeat any enemy, regardless of their training or dedication. The truth lay somewhere between these extremes, but the psychological impact of the radar revolution was undeniable on both sides of the Pacific. Medical reports from both fleets provided grim insights into the changing nature of naval warfare casualties in the radar age. Japanese survivors of radar-directed attacks showed distinctive injury patterns, reflecting the unprecedented accuracy and concentration of American gunfire, with casualty rates far exceeding those from previous naval engagements. American medical personnel, meanwhile, treated increasing numbers of cases related to the stress and fatigue of operating complex electronic systems under combat conditions. The human cost of technological warfare was becoming apparent to medical officers who found themselves treating entirely new categories of battle-related injuries and psychological trauma. The Washington's radar systems represented the cutting edge of American military technology in 1942, incorporating advances in electronics, metallurgy, and manufacturing techniques that gave the United States decisive advantages in naval warfare. The ship's primary fire control radar, designated the Mark 8 system, could detect large targets at ranges exceeding 25 miles and provide accurate gunnery solutions for targets beyond visual range. This capability transformed the fundamental nature of naval combat, allowing American ships to engage enemies they could not see while remaining invisible to optical sighting systems. The radar's precision was sufficient to track individual ships within enemy formations, providing fire control data accurate enough to achieve hit rates of over 30% at maximum effective range. The technological complexity of radar-directed gunnery required extensive integration between electronic systems, mechanical fire control computers, and the massive hydraulic mechanisms that aimed the Washington's 16-inch guns. Each radar return was processed through analog computers that calculated target bearing, range, speed, and course changes in real time. This information was then transmitted to gun directors that automatically adjusted turret training and gun elevation to maintain accurate firing solutions, even as both ships maneuvered at high speed. The entire system functioned with mechanical precision that eliminated human error from gunnery calculations, while providing fire control capabilities that exceeded the accuracy of traditional optical systems by enormous margins. American radar technology in 1942 incorporated scientific advances that Japanese researchers had dismissed as impractical or impossible to implement on naval vessels. The key breakthrough was the development of microwave radar systems that provided much greater accuracy and resolution than earlier long-wave designs. These systems used magnetron tubes, cutting-edge electronic components that generated radio waves of precisely controlled frequency and power. The magnetron technology was so advanced that it remained classified at the highest levels, with special security procedures governing its installation and maintenance on American warships. Japanese intelligence services had no knowledge of magnetron radar until after the war, leaving them unable to develop effective countermeasures against American electronic advantages. The comparative analysis between American radar-directed gunnery and traditional optical fire control revealed the magnitude of the technological revolution that was transforming naval warfare. Conventional gunnery depended on human operators who estimated range, bearing, and target movement using visual observations that were inherently limited and error-prone. Even under ideal conditions, optical fire control could rarely achieve hit rates exceeding 10% at long range, and accuracy dropped dramatically in poor visibility or when engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Radar systems, by contrast, provided precise measurements updated continuously, allowing gun crews to maintain accurate fire even against targets that were completely invisible to human observers. Japanese attempts to develop radar countermeasures revealed both their technological limitations and their failure to comprehend the full scope of American electronic warfare capabilities. Early Japanese radar development had focused on air search systems designed to detect incoming aircraft, with little attention paid to surface search or fire control applications. When Japanese engineers attempted to create naval fire control radars comparable to American systems, they discovered that their electronics industry lacked the basic components and manufacturing techniques necessary for microwave radar production. The technological gap was so enormous that Japanese radar development remained years behind American capabilities throughout the entire war. The strategic implications of radar technology extended far beyond individual ship-to-ship engagements, fundamentally altering the balance of naval power in the Pacific theater. American industrial capacity could produce radar-equipped ships faster than Japan could develop effective countermeasures, creating a technological advantage that grew more decisive with each passing month. The United States was not simply building more warships, it was creating an entirely new type of navy that could operate effectively in any weather conditions, at any time of day or night, with accuracy and precision that made traditional naval tactics obsolete. This industrial technological combination proved devastating to Japanese forces that remained dependent on conventional warfare methods. The development of radar-guided anti-aircraft systems represented another revolutionary advancement that multiplied American naval capabilities exponentially. The Washington's secondary armament, consisting of 25-inch dual-purpose guns, was integrated with radar directors that could track and engage multiple aircraft targets simultaneously. This capability meant that American ships could defend themselves effectively against air attacks while maintaining their primary mission of surface combat. Japanese naval aircraft, which had dominated Pacific skies through superior training and tactics, suddenly faced defensive fire of unprecedented accuracy that made bombing attacks suicidal against radar-equipped American vessels. The training and organizational requirements for radar-equipped ships demanded fundamental changes in American naval education and personnel management. Radar operators required months of specialized training to master the complex skills needed to interpret electronic signals and provide accurate fire control data under combat conditions. Fire control technicians needed extensive knowledge of mechanical computers, electrical systems, and ballistic calculations that went far beyond traditional naval seamanship. The American Navy responded by creating entirely new rating specialties and training programs, while expanding technical education at naval academies and training centers throughout the United States. Post-war analysis of radar effectiveness during the Guadalcanal campaign revealed statistical data that validated American confidence in technological solutions to military problems. Radar-equipped American ships achieved hit rates of over 35% during night engagements, compared to less than 8% for ships using traditional optical fire control. More significantly, radar-directed gunfire proved effective at ranges where optical systems were completely useless, allowing American forces to engage enemies before they could return fire. These performance statistics represented a quantum leap in naval combat effectiveness that gave American forces decisive advantages in every type of surface engagement. The technological legacy of radar-directed naval warfare extended far beyond World War II, establishing principles that continue to govern modern naval combat systems. The integration of electronic sensors, computer processing, and precision-guided weapons that began with the Washington's radar systems evolved into today's network-centric warfare capabilities that allow naval forces to engage targets anywhere on Earth with devastating accuracy. The fundamental concept that superior technology could overcome numerical or tactical disadvantages through precision and range became the foundation of American military doctrine for the remainder of the 20th century and beyond. The irony was profound and historically decisive. The Kirishima, symbol of Japanese naval tradition and night-fighting supremacy, had been destroyed not by superior seamanship or traditional naval tactics, but by electronic systems that made human skill and courage irrelevant in the face of technological precision. In the space of minutes, radar-directed American gunfire had transformed one of Japan's most formidable battleships into a burning funeral pyre that illuminated the death of an entire era of naval warfare. The samurai spirit that had driven Japanese sailors to master the arts of night combat proved helpless against opponents who fought with electronic eyes that could see through any darkness and mechanical brains that calculated firing solutions with mathematical perfection. The human tragedy of the Kirishima's destruction extended beyond the immediate loss of ships and sailors to encompass the psychological devastation of an entire naval philosophy rendered obsolete overnight. Japanese officers who had devoted their careers to mastering the intricacies of night surface combat found themselves facing enemies who could kill with impunity from beyond the range of human vision or traditional gunnery techniques. The warrior culture that had sustained the Imperial Navy through decades of expansion and conquest offered no solutions to the technological challenges posed by American radar systems. Courage, training, and tactical expertise became meaningless against opponents whose weapons were guided by invisible signals that no amount of human skill could detect or counter. American industrial democracy had achieved what military theorists had long considered impossible: the creation of weapon systems so technologically advanced that they rendered traditional military virtues secondary to scientific innovation and manufacturing capability. The Washington's radar-directed guns represented more than just improved naval armament. They embodied a fundamental shift in the nature of warfare itself, where victory belonged not to the most courageous or skilled warriors, but to the side that could develop, produce, and deploy superior technology faster than their enemies could adapt. This transformation reflected deeper truths about industrial society's advantages over traditional military cultures in conflicts where technological innovation determined tactical effectiveness. The strategic implications of radar-guided naval warfare extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation around Guadalcanal, foreshadowing the complete transformation of military conflict in the modern age. The same principles that allowed American battleships to destroy Japanese vessels through electronic superiority would eventually evolve into precision-guided munitions, satellite navigation systems, and network-centric warfare capabilities that continue to define military operations today. The Kirishima's destruction marked not just the end of the battleship era, but the beginning of an age where information processing and technological sophistication would prove more decisive than traditional military virtues in determining the outcomes of conflicts between nations. If you want more untold stories of World War II, subscribe now to WW2 Secret Archives, where history's darkest secrets are revealed.